Before we get started, have any of you already done the question app? So slido.com hashtag buildstufflt, buildstuff 2019. If you go in there, you can select my session and ask me specific questions, and I'll go ahead and periodically look at the iPad here to see if you have anything. All right, so let's go over what we're going to do. First of all, why would you even want user authentication at all versus anonymous access? We'll go over that first. Then we're going to talk about what account linking even is in a voice skill and what methods of user authentication are available to voice-only platforms. Then we'll go into where the user data actually lives and why it's handled there. We'll also talk about the ingredients to a voice skill and talk about which stack they're on, what environments you can put them in, and the formats you would use to communicate to secure them. We'll do a brief talk about how to set up user management with OAuth and OpenID Connect. And then we'll actually code and deploy a user managed skill. Now, because of the interest of time, I both have cake batter and a pre-baked cake for you. So depending on how good the Wi-Fi is and how much time we have, we might go all the way from scratch, or I might go, ta-da, here's a baked skill for you. Okay. And then, of course, we'll have questions. All right. So user authentication, this is a big one. So does anybody here own either one of the devices on the screen? Yeah, it's slowly starting to filter through more of Europe. I'm very excited about that. I know that there's a lot of requests from each country about bringing Alexa specifically in, I'm going to go ahead and mute her, Alexa specifically to do things in Russian and Lithuanian, etc. Right now, they are slower to adopt the platform, whereas Google Assistant is already all languages everywhere. And that's very cool. So I can use Google Assistant, on my Android devices, or of course the Google Home right there. I've used both, and I would say that approaching voice skills are exactly the same. Of course, the JSON is different, and what they want to call everything is a special snowflake, but it's the same thing. So I'm going to kind of walk you through a little bit of it. Because the documentation is just so good on Amazon Alexa's site, I'm going to go ahead and show you their walkthrough of how to handle users when you get new users on the platform and join them with your existing user database you already have. Okay, so everything that you're going to learn today, you can transfer all of that knowledge to Google Assistant as well. So I think, oh yes, anonymous access. This is interesting. I've probably built close to 40 skills over the past 3 years, and I can tell you that most of my clients are big enterprise companies. So they have at least 50,000 to 100,000 users already on the platform, not even inside of their system, that are interested in using it. So the difference between the two, of course, is whether or not they're signed into their account and you know who they are versus just using the skill completely anonymously. Why would you choose either one? The very first thing you should do is always make sure that every skill you build has at least one anonymous access flow. And here's why. You're not going to get any user adoption unless you give them an easy door that they can just get some value right away and go from there. For example, if you are a car dealership, maybe you have a BMW dealership, perhaps you shouldn't lock down and require guests to sign in just to see your, talk about the closest location, because that doesn't help your sales, does it? Is that they have to go through hoops to create an account with you just to know where your locations are. So that would be a good example of an anonymous access flow that would be really prevalent you'd want to keep. But of course, if you are a financial institution, it's also not kosher to not secure that skill, right? You want to make sure you know exactly who's trying to access their bank account data and how much they've got left in the bank, right? So that, of course, is a flow that you'd want to secure. I think the most successful skills are a healthy combination of both flows. However, there are some skills that are completely locked down. In the US, one of the most successful skills that has done this kind of a flow is a pizza company that does delivery. And they require everybody to just have an account to even use a skill because it's a very specific use case. They only want people to use the skill if they're ready to order. And if you're ready to order, you have to have an account, right? So they use this skill in a couple of ways. The first one is if you already have an account on the website They already know your favorite pizza. They already know, you already have your credit card information because you've ordered before, and they already know your address. Why would you ask all those questions again? Doesn't make sense, right? Personalization is so important in here. Voice can really bring a lot to the table because it can go faster than mobile or anything on a phone, anything on a website, because you can do 2 steps like Domino's did. What they did is saying, hey, if you're already signed in with us, I know who you are. So if you say, hey, I want to order a pizza, they say, great, would you like your regular one? If you can say yes or no. If you say yes, then the only response they give is, great, it'll be there in 30 minutes, because they don't need any more information from you. So it's so fast that all their sales skyrocketed over the past several quarters. See how easy that was for them. So their skill is very specific, very one use case. But a lot of skills can do more than one thing. And if that's the case, you need to consider whether you're going to turn away any anonymous users that might visit it. Cool. So what is account linking? I'm going to use this phrase a couple of times. Account linking is the way in which both the Google and Amazon ecosystems go ahead and do a handshake with you for OAuth. I'm sure most of you have heard of OAuth. Has anybody never heard of OAuth? Great, I've got seniors in the room. So this is the way that they set everything up to hook in directly. So your code doesn't have to have a whole lot of knowledge about any of that. It actually passes directly through their account linking flow. And I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. So when I say account linking, that's the proprietary flow that is set up through both Amazon and Google. So user auth, what methods are available for voice? This was interesting. There are lots of different factors, right, of authentication. Of course, the most common one I've seen is, SMS based, for maybe 2-factor. There's also a lot of things being developed in biosecurity. But I was asked, is this mean that I can authenticate with my voice? The answer is no. This is still a web flow. So the way that you can interact with these and do user auth is through a one-time web flow that the user will do inside of their Alexa or Google Assistant app and connect it and then go from there. So that is one thing I know that both platforms want to offer, but it is very difficult, especially if you have a family member that sounds very, very much like you. It isn't quite there yet to identify it, but it is on its way. So in the meantime, this is kind of like a good stopgap way for them to ensure identity. Any questions about that? Very good. Awesome. So where does the user data live? This is interesting. Whenever you build a skill, you're interacting with a user on their ecosystem, not yours. You're dealing with their user. Both of these platforms will generate a randomized user ID that is used the entire time that a user is active on their system. And that's all you get because they want to also secure the data for their users. So that's why it becomes important to go ahead and connect your systems with their systems. So anytime one of the Amazon users come in or a Google user comes in, they can automatically pass you the token that you need with all of your claims and information that you have in your system, like their name and their email, and maybe, any other kinds of pertinent semi-non-changing information you will own that in your system. And that is part of why you do the initial account linking with the user. You're saying, hey, I know you're an Amazon user. I need you to connect our account with that one. And they go through that flow once. Make sense? Awesome. So it's very important to understand that you're not going to get their Amazon Prime account. You're not going to know what they've bought in their shopping cart. You're only going to get a randomized user ID that they will in turn connect to yours. Any questions? Very good. I'm going to check this because I realized I told you all to go here and I didn't even look at it. Okay, cool. All right, so what are the ingredients for a secure skill? Well, have any of you here built your own authentication provider before? Your own authentication step for web or anything? Cool, you guys are on it. Well, I don't like doing that either. So I work for a wonderful company called Okta, and we actually pre-built that authorization part for you. So the integration that you have to do is very small. The example I'm going to show you today happens to be in C#.net, but it's pretty simple, and I can go ahead and explain what the code is doing. There's not a lot of it, and you can do it in any language. There's actually quite a few SDKs specifically for front-end languages like JavaScript and Rust and Go, etc. If you're interested in how I went ahead and got some of this information to develop against it, you can go to developer.amazon.com and then go into the Ask console, which is Alexa Skills Kit. What's cool about that is that instead of having to stream the audio yourself, as long as you only want to target Amazon devices, they already do all of that streaming and parsing for you. So they do all of that based on devices that they control. Now, if you want to put a skill in like a vehicle, which you totally can, like as long as you are connected to the internet and you've got a microphone and a set of speakers, you can put it anywhere, but that means you are in charge of that stream. And that can be a little cumbersome for some developers. So this is the reason that they built kind of the templated version of this experience for a developer called the Alexa Skills Kit. What we're going to do is we're going to host an API. I'm going to throw it up on Azure. It's going to be pretty invisible to you at this point, but I just want to let you know that this is where I put it. You also can put things on AWS. They have a direct integration with AWS Lambda for Alexa. That's excellent. But let's say you also want to do this for other platforms. Like once Siri eventually comes around to this ecosystem, then I'll also be adding her to my deck. All right. So let's talk about how to set up our user management, okay? I'm going to go ahead and exit out here real quick. Cool. All right. If you go to developer.okta.com, you can sign up for an account, and eventually you will land on your Okta organization's dashboard. This is what it will look like to you. Okay, so I've got several links up here. Can everybody see it all right? We're good? Cool. So there's a few steps that you would go through in order to create a connection for your voice skills. The first thing you would do is go to the Applications tab here. I've got a couple, I got one in there already. I'm going to go ahead and show it to you, and then we'll walk through what it's like to do that in a second. So this one's already done. This is the baked cake version, so I can show you a little bit easier. And you will land on the general page here, and I want you to pay attention to what is checked off right there. Not only do we do an authorization code flow, but we also do a refresh token. The very first time I did this, I was able to connect a user and it worked. And the very next time I called the skill or I tried to talk to her, it didn't work because there was no refresh token enabled. So this is important to do, especially for IoT devices where they don't have a screen that can't show you the error message, right? Right? And then if you look in down here, there's a couple of login redirect URIs. This is what is provided to you by the ecosystem, by Amazon or Google Assistant. You'll go ahead and set these here so that once the OAuth flow is done, it knows where to send you. Okay? We're good? Any questions here? Awesome. So now we have an application that's technically registered in Okta, but there are a couple of things you'd probably want to know, right? Under API and then authorization servers, this becomes really important. If you work on a larger project for a company that maybe has several different teams, like one team, developers get to have access to this stuff and one gets to have access to that, you might need to have your own rules for how the authentication works for you. Here I have one set up already, and I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the details for that one. If you notice, I just set up a basic URL for the audience. It's not really super important, but I just named it whatever you want to name it. What you're going to use right here is the issuer. Pay attention to the issuer because you're going to use this right here to also hand back to Amazon. Amazon's going to want to know what authorization server is going to handle this request. That's where you would get that information in here and look at it that way. You're also going to need a couple of scopes. So since a lot of you are new to this, I'll have to tell you how I kind of learned about this. There are different pieces of information that you can restrict. These are the rules that you can decide. And everybody's policy is different. Every company's policy is different. And this is where you would do some of that customization. But there are a couple of things here for a voice skill that you absolutely have to have or it's not going to work. One of them is offline access. So you're allowing, that means you're not directly in your application because technically Amazon's Alexa is a third-party application, right? So you need to allow them offline access in order to do that. You're also going to need to hand your user's profile over in the token, okay? And the other one is you're going to need the OpenID scope, and that comes with OpenID Connect. So the cool thing about OAuth is that it just says, hey, can this person object do something? Great, but I'm not going to tell you anything about them. So OpenID Connect kind of extends that a little bit and gives you additional key value pair data that are called claims that you can make as long as you want and send as much as you want with the token. Okay, so that's why you'd want to use OpenID Connect for this flow. If you notice here, there's a couple that were already set, but I added one down here called favorite band. Again, it's just a key value pair that you can send along with your token, and you can keep adding whatever data is in there. Any questions? No? You guys are good. Cool. You also need to set a default access policy. I didn't really need anything in mine, so I just created one and added that there. So once you have that, you need some users, right? So there are a couple of ways in which you can manage your users in here. If you already have users in something like Azure AD or on-prem, or maybe in a database somewhere, there are imports you can do into here, so you don't have to manually do that yourself. And there's also a registration option for the user. They can self-register on the sign-in page as well. But for this, I'm going to say, hey, we've got some existing users in here. I'm going to add them here. And the way you would do that is you would add a person this way. And there are a couple of ways that you can set that, right? You don't have to do it this way. There's also a CLI tool that we also have for Okta if you want to automate as much of this as possible and never see a portal. That is possible. And my coworker Micah does a really good job with explaining that. So if you have any questions about our CLI tool, just tweet at OktaDev and I will hand you to him. All right, so remember our usernames have to be an email, etc. I've already created a couple of users with real emails, and I'll show you why in a minute. And if you notice right here, there's a couple of ways that you can set this up. You can make a user and not want to know its password, or you can be the one to set the password. That means that the password you set also has to comply with the rules that you've set up for passwords. So that means if you want it to be crazy long or how many characters, that means you as the admin still have to do that. And there's also an option for the user to reset their password on the first time. So all of this is already pre-built. You didn't have to create any forget password flows or anything. All of it's already built in. This is just configuration. Okay, so I don't know about you, but I did a whole lot of login pages in my day. Okay, cool. So now we have these users in here, and they exist separately from the user that would be on the Amazon ecosystem, for example, right? But somehow I want to connect them. It's important to know that it doesn't matter what their email is in here and if it's different from there. It just matters that they sign in with something in your system or they create and register for one in your system. It doesn't have to match their Amazon email or their Google one. It can be anything. So this is truly where you can connect the two. Any questions? I keep forgetting to check this out. Good. Awesome. All right, so that's really all you'd have to set up in Okta. I know. And I'll kind of show you a little bit more about the rest as we go. Cool. If you're interested again in learning how to start up with this, you can go to developer.okta.com and you get up to 1,000 active users every month and more than that in inactive users. So this is a great way to just play around. You get like the full run of all of our capability there. And if you're interested specifically in what I'm going to show you, I wrote a blog post about this. So you don't have to remember all of it because statistics show that in an hour-long conference presentation, people only remember between 3 to 5 minutes of it. So I don't expect you to remember all of this. This is where you go for that, and you just search for user account linking in Alexa with Web API. Or if any of you have those fast phones, you can also scan my QR code. Cool. So let's go and deploy a user managed skill. I'm going to go ahead and show you what I set up here. All right. Do I have any C# developers in the house? Any? Yay! Awesome. Do I have any Java people? Yay! We're like cousins. You're like cousins, you know. We're just not in the browser. Where are my JavaScript developers? Anyone? Nope. Do I have any Ruby? Python? Everybody? Yay! 2 people. Yay! Cool. So again, I promised it wouldn't be too terrible, but .NET does take care of a couple of things like calling a REST API. Does everybody in the room feel comfortable with, doing a basic REST API call? Yes? No? If you say no, let me know. I know somebody who's great at explaining that subject. Cool. So what I've done here is I've extended a API that already exists. So if you notice, I've got several controllers over here that do other things, okay, that already are connected to my ecosystem. That's really not that important because you can just set up something real brief with this. And as long as it is a unique endpoint for Alexa and a unique endpoint for Google Assistant, because they will check to see if anything else can call it, as long as it's unique in this way, you don't have to rebuild your entire way of interacting with your system. Okay, you can just extend an existing one. So that's the reason I'm showing you a .NET 4.7 version instead of a .NET Core 2.2 or .NET Core 3, because a lot of the enterprise companies are just not on there yet. So I'm just showing you that it doesn't need to be a brand new project. You can extend something that you have already. Cool. So if you notice here, I just set up a route right there. And I'm taking in something called an Alexa request. Now, there are several libraries available for almost every ecosystem, some in NuGet, some in NPM, but let me demystify a little bit for you. If you go into the Alexa Developer Console and look in the docs for this, it gives you the JSON request and response. That's it. So any SDKs that you would download are just wrapping that. That's pretty common, right? I just want to make sure that you understand you don't have to wait for someone to update their SDK or their library. It really is just reading what that JSON is. And I'll show you that here. So I looked at the way that the JSON was structured, and I just set it up like this. This is a plain old C# object. I just set it up as a model, okay? And I just set it all up here. Things like session ID, application, attributes, all that stuff will come to you as part of the request. The first question I got this last time I gave this session was, okay, but how do I get Alexa to talk on the fly? I'm like, you can't. This is a answer. This is a post only. You have to wait for Alexa to post to your endpoint in order to respond to it, right? So you can't wake up your users at 3 o'clock in the morning. Sorry. It's kind of against their privacy policy, at least at this point. So this is definitely a passive skill. You have to wait until you get some of that, all right? So I set that up as a post, which is right there. And because I just created that object, I just wanted something easier to interact with than me having to write every node out, right? So all I do right here is take a look at something called an intent. And before I show you the Alexa portal for that, intent is exactly what it sounds like. What is the intention of this interaction? Which is another way of saying, is this an event that's firing? Is this a function that you need firing? What is the intention? So it's called intents, okay? It's also an intense process. Oh, no. Too early for puns. Okay. And then I just look at the name attribute in the JSON to find out which intent was fired. You don't have to do any of this. That's why you would use an ecosystem like Alexa or Google Assistant, is because they already have machine learning set up to parse through all of the audio stream and discover what they were saying and match it and just say, hey, your user needs you to answer this intent, not this is exactly what the user said. No, they say, hey, basically the user said this intent. So it's a lot easier programmatically. Wouldn't you agree, to not have to sit here and match a whole bunch of cases manually? I mean, that would be a lot of work. So definitely take advantage of the fact that we've offloaded that process to them. And then I just take a look and see how it's set up. And you'll notice that there's a couple here that you get for free. This one would also say Google Assistant, cancel intent, or stop intent would be the same. And this is something that is already set up in the system, and you have an option of how you would like to handle it. In this case, I'm not very good at Lithuanian, but I was told that this is goodbye or bye or see ya, right? Something like that. Yes. I don't know how she's going to pronounce it, but we're going to see. And this is, if we go ahead and fire this hello intent, this is the little amount of code I actually need to do that. All I do is I create a new object, and I only have to set a couple of properties on that object to send over the wire. I only have to type out what you want her to say. If you notice, there is an output speech text, so that's what you're physically going to see as a reprompt. That means if the user says nothing, after about 3 seconds, she'll say something else. right? So you can control what that second prompt is. And it is suggested to not say the same thing. Try to be a little more explanatory or provide a little guidance, because clearly the user either wasn't listening or is having a problem. Like the Wi-Fi. Oh, it's okay. I can show you everything in the simulator. The one thing I want you to pay attention to is should end session. All right. We want to have real brief skills that are helpful and then get out of the way. That's what an assistant would do, right? They wouldn't just sit here and chit chat the whole time. So you need to make sure that you're sending that to true when you are actually done. I'm setting this to false so that I can allow the user to also try something else, or perhaps this is the first part of a 2 or 3 step conversation. Okay. What that means is that if you set that to false, that light is just going to listen. Okay. If you set it to true, then it'll stop listening. So if you want to put this into the store, it's important that you set that to true when you are actually done delivering value to your guest or your customer. Okay. And then you'll be able to get that signed off. Too many times, a lot of those skills that I built, this was the issue, is that they're like, you're still listening, you're still open, but you already answered the question. So why are you still listening for the user? That's not a good user experience, because then you're just hitting them with a reprompt, and that's annoying, right? If you already delivered value, don't keep going. Keep going. Okay, you're good? Awesome. Okay, looks like you do have a question. This is not refreshing. Yes. So it looks like this had the same problem that Alexa did with the internet. So that's all right. No worries. Do I have any questions from here? Yes. That was a great question. The question was, how is the match happening with what the user says to get to that intent that gets sent over the wire, right? Is there a way to register it? Yes. So now that I've shown you what our responsibility is on our API, because this is literally it, then let's take a look at what it means to do that inside of the Alexa Developer Portal, okay? So let's say we create a skill and we call it build stuff, because why not, right? Over here on the left-hand side, this is actually pretty nice portal. It always goes through changes, just like GoDaddy, so make sure you look at it every few months. But over here on the left, you'll see you can add intents here. And I already added one to kind of show you an example. This is where you would register the different ways in which a user might say this thing, and you want that intent to fire. This is an excellent job for a project manager or a product owner or a non-technical person to just go ham. And if they have a lot, look over to the right. We have a bulk edit and an export option. You can send a comma delimited list. I never say that correctly. Anyway, and upload that. And if you look down here, there's also another option called slots. So you may not know what the user says. And for an example is that I don't know what your horoscope sign is, but you might say, hey, tell me what my horoscope sign is today. And I say, what is your horoscope sign? And you might say Virgo or whatever it is. I'm a Virgo, so that's what I chose. Clearly, that comes from a selection of a predefined list, right? Or maybe not. And so this is where you would also register that. And you can upload that from here. So you can set what type it is. It's just like any other object. You can create a custom list of things, again, that you can import manually, or you can do it all through the CLI tool, okay? Here, I might create a new slot. I might call it a thing, which is whatever you call it is how you will access it in the JSON that you get during that post. You'll say, oh, I want to look at this slot and see what the user said, right? And it will match it. So if a user kind of has an accent, which is very common, especially in different parts of Europe, but also even in the US, we definitely have different kinds of accents in the East Coast to the West Coast and definitely down south. So the way somebody says something could be interpreted differently. This is basically seeding. For any of you, are any of you familiar with the basics of machine learning? No? Okay, few of you. So this probably sounds very familiar to you. You need to seed that data. However, this is a learning engine. So Alexa is backed by Lex, and Google Assistant is backed by TensorFlow. Okay, so those are deep learning engines that will continue to go, you know what, users keep asking this, and I think they really mean that. So I might have seeded it with 5 phrase is here, but then it goes, that also kind of looks like this, and it does a matching based on like the area that the person lives in. And some of it even comes down to culture. Google is very, very good about saying, hey, well, they're in this rural part of Rwanda, so they probably say this to say hello and goodbye, which is more casual or more formal, and they might add it to this list so that your intent fires. Make sense? But you still have to say, this is roughly a sample size of the kinds of things that people would say to fire this. Okay? Very good? That's a good question. Best one yet. Cool. All right. Okay, so if I were to add intent, this is where I would add it. It's pretty easy. You just click add and you fill out the name of the intent, and it could be like a build intent. You can call it whatever you want. You don't have to say intent. I just think it's incredibly clear whenever you get it over the line and you have JSON. So you just create it from there, and it goes from there. It's very easy to mess around in the portal with this. Again, anything that you do here can also be done in JSON. So let's say you're not really into clicky buttons and fun things like that, right? This is exactly the same thing I just did. All it does is it renders the JSON this way. You can do the same thing by dragging and dropping your own JSON file in here if you want to put it in source control and you want to keep it in GitHub somewhere and do iterations on it. This is another way you can do it. And if you don't want to even click on that button, again, you can use Amazon's CLI tool for that. Cool. All right, so now that we have all this in here, how do we tell it to come to our API? You click on endpoint. In Google Assistant, this is called Webhooks. So it's the same. All you're doing is you're registering where this is going to live. Okay, so if you notice here, there is a recommended option that you go with AWS because, of course, this belongs to Amazon. Of course, they would want you on their ecosystem. But I'm here to tell you, you do not need to do that for any of these. Okay, so if you notice, I set mine up already. I happen to have an API and I just extended it with my controller and my anonymous user endpoint. And what I want you to pay attention to is the certificate option that I chose. Okay, because this is hosted on Azure, it is one of the trusted domains that's out there. So you can just use their wildcard certificate because they are a certificate authority. Any questions about what that means? Very good. I got the best people today. You're right. Got it. If you notice down here, you can also work on timing, how long it takes for the response by putting it on a different server in a different country. This is how you can kind of spread it out and make it a little bit quicker to respond. Cool. So now that we have all this, looks pretty easy, right? You would go to the top here under invocation and make sure that whatever you're telling the user to invoke your skill is easy for them to say. So, for example, I go to a lot of conferences that have very strange names, okay? A lot of them sound like people's first names. Some of them are connected words, that become a thing. So this is where you would phonetically spell out what it is the user would be saying. You'd phonetically spell it out, but the actual name up here is what would be registered and it would show on their Alexa app, okay? But this is the part where you'd make sure that it's phonetic. So now you got a crash course a little bit in how to build an Alexa skill. You would save your model and you would build your model right here. And once you build it, then you can go to the test page. Now, if you don't have one of these devices, do not fear. It's okay. They have a pretty decently built out experience in the browser directly, and you can select your language from here. Because we're in the UK, or because I was in the UK when I built this, I decided to have her have a British accent. But the other skill I have has an American accent, and you can kind of do that depending. There's also English with an Indian accent, like from India as well, because that also can be very challenging to understand somebody who's speaking a language with an accent, which I'm sure you get all the time with Americans trying to speak Lithuanian. So this is where you can just type exactly out what you want to say, or you can enable your microphone here and just go. So I might say something like, tell build stuff to say hello. We'll see if that works, right? So what you'll see here is two things. You'll get what you sent through the system to And then you'll also see the output that came back from it. So this is a great way to debug exactly the structure of your JSON, which probably causes 90% of any issues you have are based on the JSON structure here. So at least you can test this and go through it like this. And if you scroll down, you'll see also how it would render on a screen. The screen could be the Alexa app on their phone, or it could be the Echo Show, one of those that are built into the device. Okay, this is the same kind of preview you would also expect for the Alexa, for Google Assistant as well. All right, I should give a candy bar to anybody who can count how many times I say Alexa or Google Assistant in this talk. Cool. So this is how you would do it. You can put some manual JSON stuff. You can also test out if you were to change the way that Alexa says something, how would it sound? You can test that out here as well, and you can look at the device log. Right? I think we're good to go here, right? Awesome. So I'm going to see if she actually works. Let's go. Okay. Alexa, tell Build Stuff to say hello.
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Well, why doesn't she know that one? Do you know why? Because this is not my development environment. This is connected to my actual Amazon account, like the one I use to build things, to buy toilet paper and such. So please don't tell her anything like that. So how do you extend that? Like, how do you allow for testing besides just you? Because obviously, if this was connected to the account right here, the developer account, then it would be able to see the skill, but I haven't published it. I don't even have beta testing on. Can you do that? The answer is yes. So if we go over here to distribution, you're going to have to fill out a couple of things. I'm not going to go over those today. It's a lot of things like, what's the name? Can you give me some icons? What is your privacy policy? Etc. These are things, again, that are great for your project manager to go and do, right? And so if you look down here, there's 2 pages of it. Once you fill all those things out that are mandatory, then you're allowed to have an active beta test. I set myself as the administrator here, but I can add anybody's email here that has an Alexa account. This is to their Alexa account, not your Okta users. This is to their Alexa account saying, hey, do you have an Amazon account? They say, yeah. So what is it? I'm like, oh, this is mine. Okay. Right? So you can add them and then it'll send them and add them as a tester. Okay. So let me look and see what that would be. Cool. So it should say, hey, you're invited to test this new skill from this developer. You should enable it. When you enable it within your email, it'll open up the Alexa Spot app, which is a lot like saying ATM machine, but I digress. And it will ask you, hey, do you want to go ahead and test this skill or not? Now, your account can see it. Now your account can see the dev skill. All this is really important because most of the examples that I saw, kind of like the Hello World version of this, were all just using the developer's account. And that's not something that's scalable, right? You need to send this out to beta testers like your mom and your uncle, and they are really good at breaking these. So I highly recommend it. Cool. So in order for her to see that, you just have to enable it here. Okay. And I'm logged in, of course, with this account. So it technically should work, right? Alexa, tell Build Stuff to say hello.
Hello, builders. How about a round of applause for Build Stuff?
Yay!
Hello, builders. How about a round of applause for Build Stuff?
Cancel.
Icky.
So that's about as good as you're going to get Lithuanian from me. Cool. So that's how that all works. And this is great. So now we have an anonymous skill that doesn't look at the user, but can still deliver something valuable, right? Awesome. Now what do we do? I've got all these users, and I kind of want to use some of their information to personalize the experience, like say hello to their name, or perhaps, store a little piece of information about them, like their favorite band, right? In order for me to do this, I'm going to switch over to this Music Guru skill that I built, okay? This one is registered as a US version of the skill, so I'm going to have to change in the settings. You can do this this also works in the app, by the way. If you have the Alexa app, it still works the same way. I'm going to go into this particular echo dot and I'm going to scroll down and change the language. You have to create a skill per language set. You can use the same endpoints and everything, but you're going to have to register them separately. And they do that on purpose so that you think about whether or not you need to answer in a different language instead of just your default, right? So I'm going to change her back to United States. And now she can see US skills, okay? Now I can register this skill in several languages, but right now I only registered in one. So technically now she should be able to see this skill, okay? All right, let's see if this works. Alexa, what time is it?
The time is 3:41 p.m.
Okay, so her
Happy Wednesday.
So now her accent's changed. It was pretty fast, right? All those updates happen very rapidly if you're wanting to test this out. Right now, if I set the anonymous user endpoint here, you'll notice I also added another intent called favorite band, right? But I'm not so worried about that right now. I just want to make sure that this skill works. And hello is always my default way. Every time I start a skill, put in something that's like an easy test intent. Even if you don't broadcast it to the users, that's something that they can say. And that's how all my skills go. So I know that every skill at least has a hello intent, right? Alexa, tell Music Guru to say hello.
Hello from Music Guru.
Great. Cancel.
See you later.
Right. So I know that the skill works now. But I'm not going to know the answer to the next question, which would be, what is your favorite band? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set, I know this is a lot of information at once. You guys are doing great. I'm going to go into that skill inside of the Alexa Developer Portal and show you how that's set up, okay? I need to re-authenticate because why not? Cool. All right, here's my Music Guru skill. Cool. My favorite band intent, ask some questions. Notice I'm not using the slots. You know why? Because I already have that information. I already know the answer. So the slots are something that the user would provide to me, but I don't need that because I already know the answer. So this is a way to personalize your skill without asking them 30 questions every time you interact, right? This is where people will pay you a lot of money to build a skill like this, okay? Okay, so now if you look down at my endpoint, it's now set to an authenticated user endpoint, the same certificate. Now let's click on this dubious looking link down here called account linking. And this is how it's set up. It asks you a few questions, whether or not you're going to allow users to create something on the fly or not. I went ahead and turned that on because I do want to allow somebody who's not my user right now, but they are an Amazon user, to come into my ecosystem, right? So I went ahead and turned that on and allow users to enable the skill without access to account linking. We talked about why, right? We want them to have both options. And yes, you can technically do an implicit grant. But as my good friend Aaron Parecki would say, don't do this. Please use the auth code flow. It's much more secure, it's much better to do, and it's easier to reject whenever somebody has anything stolen or taken. So if you look here, there's a couple of authorization URIs. Any of them look familiar? I think I showed them to you in the Okta portal, right? I looked at our applications, and this is where that kind of handoff really is that you don't really have to code almost any of this, right? You're just allowing Okta to directly do this flow via an OAuth configuration inside of Alexa, okay? So remember we had these login redirect URIs right there? You get those from this page, account linking, okay? And if you scroll down, there they are, okay? That's where you're gonna need them. But all the rest of the data is going to come from Okta. You're not going to be able to fill any of this out unless, of course, you roll your own auth, unless you take a look at this, okay? So if you notice down here, you have a client ID and a client secret created specifically for your application, and that would go here. Obviously, anytime you go on the page, it's going to blank out your secret. And remember how I showed you that authorization server? I'm going to click over there in a second. This is where you would put that, and then you would append v1 authorized to that, and for the access token would be v1 token. I don't know the answer as to why it is versioned, but it's probably a good thing. Okay, that's what we have there. And then you want to change it'll be defaulted to basic authentication, but because we want to use the OpenID Connect extended version of this, we want to use credentials and request body instead. Okay, so the scope is OpenID, profile, and offline access. Do you guys remember me showing you that? I'll go ahead and show you where to look at that in a minute. The domain list, whenever you sign up for that Okta account, this is where you would put that domain. It'll usually say dev and a whole bunch of numbers and .okta.com. This is where this would go unless you register a custom domain like I have. Okay, you're good? We're almost there. I set the access token expiration to be a little longer because I like to do that just for this. And that's all you'd need here in order to set this up, and you would save it. What ends up happening here is this will allow a user to go through this flow. Okay, so if I do, go ahead, go back here to our skills. Remember, this is my beta tester account here that can see things, right? So I'm looking under dev skills. You see, there's build stuff, but I also have the music guru skill, right? If you notice, I can disable the skill and she won't be able to see anything, right? So I say, Alexa, ask Music Guru what is my favorite band. She can't see the skill.
I don't know, but I'm sure you have great taste.
So I'm going to enable it and see what happens here. Okay, Alexa, ask Music Guru what is my favorite band.
You are not currently linked to this skill. Please go into your Alexa app and sign in.
So we go to settings. Okay, because we set this up with Okta, they just click on link account, and then however you designed your login screen, they get redirected to it. If you look right in the browser there, you can see that. Okay, so I'm going to head and sign in with an existing user that I had added, those 4 that were in Okta. And you also, of course, can sign up if you see down at the bottom. So I'm going to sign in with this account. Internet's not too bad. Yeah. And you should get this at the end. So Alexa, ask Music Guru, what is my favorite band?
I don't know, but I'm sure you have great taste.
Oops, wait, sorry again. Alexa, ask Music Guru, what is my favorite band?
Hello, Jean. Your favorite band is White Stripes.
So how did she know that? Because within the token, remember we looked in it, deserialized it, and there is a claim in there, which is the key value pair with the user's name and anything that you added in there. So if I look at my users here, okay, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the account that I logged in with, which is Jean Gray's account. And if you look inside profile, I set a custom information right there called favorite band. That means that the user can log into their account and change any of this data. You don't have to know about that, and it's all done on the fly. Pretty cool, right? That's pretty cool. You didn't have to manage almost any of that. All right. So, that's definitely the wrong slide. Cool. Do I have any specific questions since I only have a couple minutes? We're good? Awesome. Well, if you're interested again in learning anything more about Auth, please go to our blog and stay curious. Thank you very much.